video, I want to begin by saying that this case is very controversial. This video is based solely on research that I have done myself, and it is based on my opinion. I do understand that some people that watch this video will have a different opinion than me, but my intentions aren't to insult anybody or hurt anybody, and I just want this family to receive the closure that they deserve. This case was just recently reopened, and I believe that the family deserves some closure. Some graphic images may be shown in this video, and I will be using some adult language, so viewer discretion is always advised. Don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel, and leave a comment if you'd like. Just always keep it respectful. And with that, let's get started. So I just decided to sit down with you guys and just discuss this case with you. Instead of doing my makeup like I do in my other videos, I feel like this case deserves my utmost attention along with yours. I feel like doing my makeup while talking about the case will distract me from the very important details of the case. And I feel like there are some very important factors that need to be heard. And there's also so much detail along with every other case that I do. I feel like this video, in order to make it not 2 hours long, I thought this was the best way to go about it. This story makes you think about everything. The evidence that I'm gonna give to you today will pull you in a million different directions. The first time I started reading about the case, I felt a certain way. As I kept reading about it and rereading and writing my story today, my brain just kept going back and forth, back and forth. I felt one way, 1 minute, then the next minute I was like, what the hell? I'm gonna try to be as unbiased as I can be, so you guys can really feel the way that you guys want to feel about this case. I also want to say, if you guys are interested in a tutorial on my makeup that I'm wearing here, please leave a comment and like the video, and I will film it for you guys. I have a slight tutorial on my TikTok if you guys want to go check that out. I'll leave it in the description bar below. So it was on January 10th, 2013, Kendrick Johnson's mother became worried when her son didn't return after school. Now, she understood that he may have gone to an after-school event. I think it was a basketball game he was thinking about going to. So she did try to call his cell phone numerous times, but she did not receive any answers. So after waiting a few hours for her son to return, and once he didn't, she decided to drive to the school herself and see if maybe he was hanging around the school parking lot or something with some friends. But she didn't find anybody. She waited till a little bit after midnight, hoping that he would come home, and when he didn't, she finally called the police. Police assured her that he was just being a teenager and just to keep them updated. So the next morning, when he still hasn't returned home, she decided to go back to the school. She found out he didn't attend his first or his third period class, and he had been marked absent. While waiting in the superintendent's office, rumors flooded the hallways. Students were saying that they found Kendrick's body. A couple students found Kendrick's body wrapped up in a wrestling mat in the school's old gym. A couple students were climbing on top of these said wrestling mats when they noticed a pair of socks hanging out of the top. When they peeked inside, they saw Kendrick Johnson's body. Now, these mats are very heavy, so they did ask for a teacher to come help them to knock the mat over and see if they can get him out. They thought he was joking. They kept yelling, like, "What are you doing? What are you doing in there? Get out!" But he didn't respond. When the teacher and the students knocked the mat over, they smelled the smell that you never want to smell. It was that of a decomposing body. And when the teacher noticed this, he called 911 immediately. This smell refrained them from opening up the mat to allow Kendrick's body to be released from the mat. The family, obviously devastated, waited months for video surveillance tapes from the school. I do know that there are some laws that restricted them from getting this, so they did have to go through the court of law to receive them. And when they got them, things were not what they seemed. Kendrick was seen on video surveillance tapes outside of the gym doors at 12:59 p.m. According to timestamps on the video, it was 12:59. And then he would be seen inside of the gym at 1:09 p.m. There was no recording of the 10 minutes between the 59 and the 1:09 of Kendrick entering the gym. Some reports say that the timestamps were actually incorrect, and if they were correct, he would have been seen at 1:25 walking through a couple hallways on his way towards the gym. In one of the videos, the third block classes were dismissed, so he was seen in the hallway with other students. If the timestamps were actually accurate, he would have been seen opening up the gym doors at 1:27 p.m. When police reviewed these cameras, they assumed that Kendrick was just heading to the gym to retrieve his shoes or drop them off. It was known that a lot of the students, especially the athletes, would bring their belongings to this old gym and store them within the mats, on the mats, wherever. The school made them pay for lockers, and this was just a way to avoid that. Kendrick shared his shoes with another student, and they would store his shoes in the same mat every day, so they both knew exactly where they would be. This would be an important fact because Kendrick would put his shoes in a mat that was always laying down on the ground. He would put them right inside. But that day, which was about 3 days after they returned from winter break, he would find that all the mats were picked up. And this would mean that his shoes that were inside of that mat had fallen all the way to the bottom. The mats were apparently really heavy, so he wanted, I guess, to reach inside the mat. He would climb up, reach inside the mat, and try to retrieve them, according to police. No one was seen on video recording entering the gym before Kendrick did or after he did. This is where things start to get a little sticky. Both the school district and police department both state that the footage was unedited and it is raw. But when experts looked at the video camera, they said there's an hour missing from the footage. A whole hour. And the footage that was inside of the gym was a little unclear and it was a little blurry as well. The camera inside of the gym and the camera outside of the doors were about 10 minutes apart in their timestamps. And it seemed like a large amount of the footage was deleted, which left the footage that was remained on the video surveillance. The playback of the video was a little weird. So students that were seen in the video recording would just vanish, and this was odd, and it was more like a time jump almost. Now, I did read that the cameras were motion detected. So if there wasn't enough light for the camera to be activated, it wouldn't record. So it is possible that at one moment it had enough light to start recording, and if it lost that light, it would stop recording. And then once it regained it, start recording again. So it is possible that the students that were in one frame wouldn't necessarily be in that frame if it stopped and started recording because it lost light or gained it. Now, the footage that the family received did not show Kendrick climbing on the mat or even getting stuck in the mat at all. The coroner's report states that he wasn't notified until 3:45 p.m. That is several hours after Kendrick was initially found. They state in the coroner's report that his body was in worse condition when they arrived, they feel, than when he was initially found. When they arrived, it was very clear that his body has been moved. And I don't know if this is from when the students and the teachers knocked it down to try to help him, or if it was moved again after that. They state that the scene was very contaminated and unkept, and that there was zero cooperation from police. The coroner said his original report that he turned into the police department was also altered, so he had to resubmit it again. After a very short 4-month investigation, Investigators concluded that Kendrick's death was a freak accident. They said that Kendrick must have climbed to the top of the wrestling mat, went to reach for them, and fell inside. He was said to have died from positional asphyxiation. He was said to have died from positional asphyxiation, which is pretty much suffocation. Kendrick's mother's motherly instinct kicked in, and she said, "There's no way." She really felt like someone had killed her son. Whether this was kind of a prank that has gone wrong, or this whole thing was intentional. But she knew somebody killed her little boy. Kendrick was found upside down in this wrestling mat, and his head was very swollen from being upside down and all the blood rushing to his head. He was said to have been in that mat for at least 21 hours. Kendrick Johnson's family took a picture of him post-mortem and posted it on the internet and sent it to the media, allowing the public to see their son's gruesome death. They didn't disclose that this picture was from after his autopsy when they sent it out to the media, but it did allow us to see that just dying from suffocation was not all that probable. Something more must have been done to this young man before his death. Kendrick's family was convinced that his death was being covered up by the police department and that he had been severely beaten and rolled up in this mat and died. But to police, this was a done deal. The case was closed. But they would put their foot right in the door and not allow them to close it. They were going to fight tooth and nail to get justice for their son. Let's look at some facts. So Kendrick's shoulder width was 19 inches wide. It's presumed that it would be almost impossible for him to fit into the hole of the wrestling mat, and that was 14 inches wide. So when I picture it, I guess I could see how someone would try to squeeze themselves. If you raise your arm up and your other arm back, I guess you can alter yourself in a way where you can fit inside of it. It would be tough, but it's possible, I guess. But since the wrestling mat that he was specifically put in measured 14 inches, one could also say that if he was rolled up in the mat after death or whatever, the diameter of this hole would be the same width as his shoulders, but it wasn't. So for me personally, I could see both sides of the story at this point. And this is one of the very many reasons that I keep jumping back and forth. When Kendrick was pulled out of the mat finally, he did have one arm raised above his head. This would assure police that he was reaching for the said shoes. Now, police said this would slim his shoulders, which would allow him to reach inside of the mat to reach for the shoes. Okay, so you say it's just an accident, but there's evidence suggesting otherwise. The shoes Kendrick wore to school that day were found on top of him. If Kendrick was reaching down inside of the mat to get this shoe or shoes, and he got stuck, how was he able to put those shoes on top of him? Now, the shoes just weren't thrown on top of him. They were actually wedged between his leg and the mat. So this could lead me to think, okay, one, somebody could have tucked them in there on purpose after he was wrapped up in the mat, or somebody saw them, on the ground or whatever, picked them up and threw them up on the mat and they fell in. And if that's the case, if they got wedged, I could see if Kendrick was still alive and maybe he wiggled when they got tossed up there and they ended up getting wedged that way. But I find that harder to believe, because if he was still alive and was able to wiggle, wouldn't he have been yelling for help if he was truly stuck? And somebody, the person that threw the shoes up there, they definitely would have heard him, right? And then I can also think that maybe when he, or before he reached into the mat, he put the shoes next to him, and when he fell in, they got knocked in. I don't know. I keep going back and forth. It's so difficult. So it could go in a lot of different ways, but this next piece of evidence is of the utmost importance. So under Kendrick's body was a shoe that he was apparently reaching for. Under this shoe was a pile of blood. Now it's very important that you understand the blood was under the shoe, not on top of the shoe. Now I know Kendrick was upside down, which would lead me to think all the blood rushed to his head. That's why his head was so swollen. And eventually blood would start coming out of the holes of your face, like your ears, your eyes, your nose, your mouth, so on. But if this were the case, blood must have been on top of the shoe, but it wasn't. Police would also look through the girls' restroom for the old gym, and they would find paper towels in a trash can covered in blood. And there was also blood on the wall nearby the mats. So police did test this blood, and when they tested it, it came back that it wasn't Kendrick's, and they dismissed it. So here you have blood that doesn't belong to the victim, and you're dismissing it? That's weird. That's suspicious. To me, it seemed that the police decided that he died in a freak accident and the door was closed. That was it. That was the end of it. They didn't want to do any further investigation on this case. They didn't even try to preserve any of the evidence in case it needed to be reopened years later, which is where we find ourselves in today. This is a little bit of a predicament. The family requested a second autopsy, and I feel, I don't think it has anything to do with like the homicide itself or whatnot, but I do feel like it is important to state when this autopsy was done, they found that Kendrick's body was stuffed of newspapers. I will leave links down below if you guys are interested in reading about that. I just felt like, yes, I should note it, but I'm not going to get into the details of that. But I will say that in this autopsy specifically, they found there was an acute hemorrhage to the soft tissues of the upper part of his neck. This finding would suggest that he died of a rapid death. And all the findings that they found in this autopsy would be inconsistent to the first report. They would report that the cause of death would be blunt force trauma to his neck and that the death was not accidental. And they would suggest that further investigation needed to be done. If this was a murder cover-up by police or whoever, who did it? The family does point their fingers in a specific direction. A year before Kendrick was found, he got into a fight with another and two of his friends. Now these three kids and him were apparently friends, but his parents were stuck to the fact that they were not friends. They would state that they were nowhere near friends and that there was problems between these boys all the time. His family thinks that these three boys are the ones who attacked him. The father of two of these boys had worked for the FBI, and this is where a cover-up theory comes in play. And it's believed that these kids were getting help from the inside. One brother said that the day that Kendrick disappeared, he was nowhere near him. He was actually at a wrestling tournament. And the other brother was on the other side of the school. He was nowhere near Kendrick. No one that was interviewed said that one of these boys were at the same time and place as Kendrick at the time of his death. No one can place them near Kendrick. The day that Kendrick's body was found, the boy's father would go and sign one of the brothers out of school. I think it's important to note that the reporter, pretty much the only reporter that's able to get any sort of interview from this family, knows both the father and the mother of these two boys. He was also a former teacher at the high school, so he knew both boys. Now, according to Twitter, I know, very trustful. But according to Twitter, he would tweet at one of the boys and ask him, "Where were you at 1:35 p.m. on January 10th, 2013? The student responded saying that he was in Macon, Georgia, with the school's wrestling team on January 9th, January 10th, and January 11th for duels. But a very important fact would come into play. The bus for this said tournament didn't leave until January 10th at 12:30 p.m. Kendrick's family hired their own investigators, and when they started investigating, they found video surveillance cameras that saw all the boys in the same room. And this would be the lunchroom. It's also said that one of these boys was seen on camera walking through the hallways near the old gym where Kendrick was found. And it's also said that this boy was seen wearing one thing in previous recordings during the day and seen wearing a complete different outfit after. Kendrick's family just wants the truth to be spoken, and they want the case reopened. In 2016, the state felt like this case needed to be closed. They did what they could, they felt, and that was it. Close the doors. It's over. Thankfully, we just got news that this case is being reopened and reinvestigated. Who took this young boy's life? And for what reason? Kendrick Johnson deserves justice, and so did his family. Please remember that this video is based on my research and my opinion, and I understand that some of you may feel a different way than I do, and that's okay. I will link all my sources below if you guys are interested in reading up on this case, and there's also another link, a YouTube link I will put down there that I think you guys will find very interesting, and it does show some of the footage that I talked about. We need justice for Kendrick Johnson.